Good morning. Welcome to a new live episode of Fumblegate here on YouTube for January 23rd, 2020. I'm Jason Grefer. This is former Cincinnati Bengal Adam Kieft. You'll notice we have the Cincinnati Bengals helmet on the table. This is the real helmet Adam wore when he was with the Bengals, by the way.
Yeah.
Not just a replica or a souvenir or what have you. This is a real deal.
As you'll note, it's very clean still.
Well, it's got a couple scuffs on the top.
It might be from my kids playing with it rather than me.
Kind of dusty.
Well, my only appearance would have been at the beginning of the season, and I think
he's wiping the dust off.
Yeah, I think they cleaned it up for me.
You can see there's the real deal. The number on the back there, so it's legit.
Oh,
what's your stuff, man? Come on.
Idiot.
Weekly thing.
No, and as you'll note, this is these are now outdated. These helmets are now heavy compared to the stuff that guys wear nowadays. It's I guess if you go, I have all my helmets from high school, college, and the NFL.
He does.
The progression of how light they got through the time, and compared to being a high school football coach, compared to how light they are now for these high school kids, obviously pros are wearing stuff that's even fancier and far more advanced. But it's just amazing to see. Where technology has come with helmets and how much easier they are to wear compared to the heavy things that I used to wear.
This is pretty bulky.
Yeah, they still models like this are still around. We have them in the high school level but the newest Speed Flex, which is the brand Rydell brand helmet, is about half that weight, and it's crazy, but. They're supposedly making them safer, but they're also making them lighter, and it's kind of crazy to think of how that works out. But anywho,
we are going to talk about the Bengals here today, which is, as I said, it's one of the reasons why the helmet is here. So we will touch on that. And the Senior Bowl is getting going. The Bengals coaching staff is one of the teams coaching in the Senior Bowl. You found a funny clip this morning from the other team coaching the Senior Bowl. Matt Patricia, the Detroit Lions, got on one of your favorite quarterbacks.
Oh, yeah, Shea Patterson getting a little earful about not being able to catch a snap from under center. Apparently his second drop snap of the practice yesterday, and Matt Patricia was not very happy about it, gave him some colorful words. Go find the clip if you want. It's a real quick 10-second clip. Don't listen to it at work, not safe for work. But yeah, unsurprisingly, Shea Patterson not having a great Senior Bowl. All those elite quarterbacks that come out of the University of Michigan, trained by Harbaugh over there, unsurprisingly not having a good Senior Bowl for Shea Patterson. And it's a wonder why they couldn't, win the Big Ten and play for a national championship when they have a subpar quarterback. But hey, his brother's got his back, so we're good.
He won 9 games again.
Well, yeah, that's where Michigan's going to be. You're going to be 9-game winners in the second-tier program. Good for you. Anyway.
Let's move on, and we will touch a little bit on the conference championships here. Of course, it's the bye week, one of the Super Bowl, so we'll just kind of give you a little bit of a taste of what to look for in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, we won't do any predictions on the actual game this week, but we will talk about what to look for. Next week, we'll do the big Super Bowl show, and we'll get all of it
next week will be fully dedicated to the Super Bowl. So let's get right to it. We were going to lead off with the discussion of the conference championship games, but some pretty big news broke yesterday in the NFL, in which takes an extra bit of interest for us here at Fumblegate. Eli Manning has decided he's going to hang him up. He had rode the bench most of the year this year behind Daniel Jones, and said, sitting on the bench isn't fun. Can't blame him for that. Thought about maybe going elsewhere for an opportunity to start, but I'm sure once the season ended, he quickly realized there was not going to be an opportunity anywhere else to start. And not wanting to ride the bench again and do it in another uniform, he's decided that he's had enough. 16 years in the league, 14 of them as the full-time starter. Some starts this year, took over about halfway through his rookie year for struggling then Kurt Warner, who's now in the Hall of Fame. And so that leads to you wonder what his future is. Some people speculate. This is a funny meme that Adam actually sent me this morning, so I thought it would be funny to throw on here. Their reaction, a possible conversation here, as you can see, to the hire of Jason Garrett as the Giants' offensive coordinator, which I'm not really.
it's a surprising move. But
I'm not sure that anybody's really a big fan of that one.
No, but
because it didn't.
Well, by all accounts, he was a pretty good offensive coordinator before he became a head coach, and perhaps that's. It could be similar to the Marvin Lewis argument, where a good coordinator, not a very good head coach, but got a longer tenure.
North Turner.
Yeah, got a longer tenure than maybe they should have, and hopefully just taking some responsibility off of Jason Garrett's plate makes him an effective play caller again. And as we know, most of the NFL is not unique in their offense. Terminology is largely the same usually. Like a lot of the things that teams do is largely the same. It should be an easy transition, I would imagine. The teams have similar makeups for what they do. Obviously, 2-star running backs on each team, so it'll be interesting to see how the Jason Garrett hire works out for him.
You'll have Daniel Jones and Saquon
a young quarterback,
and they saw Dallas twice a year, so they might have some kind of idea going in. I don't know that it'll be a totally clean start, but I'm not sure about that one. So Joe Judge obviously needs help because he's never been even a coordinator before.
We can get into the fact that we just hired a special teams guy to be our head coach, but
it worked out for Baltimore when they hired John Harbaugh.
So.
It does. Sometimes it can work out.
It can work out.
Sometimes not. Sometimes it can work out. Sometimes not. That's kind of the career of Eli Manning, and so he's announcing tomorrow morning that he's officially retiring. And, everybody has their thoughts on this. You first think about what his career was about, how he performed, how good he was at times, how bad he was at times. And so you just wonder, does he have the credentials to get a gold jacket into Canton? Here's a couple of graphics here you're going to see that make the case for Eli Manning to get into the Hall of Fame and the case against. Let's start with the good. 2-time Super Bowl MVP. Only a handful of other guys have ever done that before. So he got there twice. It was the only 2 years you'll see that he was able to win a playoff game. He went ahead. They went and won the whole thing. You see 7th all-time in passing yards, 7th all-time in touchdowns. Was as durable as you could ask for.
Yeah.
It won 210 straight starts at one point. So he was never hurt. He was in there all the time. And there you see at the bottom when they won the 2 Super Bowls, when they beat the Patriots in 2 Super Bowls, during both those playoff runs, he was really good. 5 of the 8 wins were on the road there, so it wasn't like he was just coasting at home and getting it done at home. He had to go on the road and get it done quite often in those playoff runs, and was very good. You see 15 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. That's pretty darn good considering the bulk of your games were away from home.
Yeah.
Not too bad. So there's one argument for Canton. Here are some of the numbers that will turn the argument the other side. He is a dead average quarterback record-wise. 117 wins, 117 losses as a starting quarterback for the Giants.
Yeah, he was 2 games over 500 before this season, and he ended up going 1-3 as a starter, made him back to 117 and 117.
And his numbers even more breakdown, a little more interesting in that regard, because leading up to the second Super Bowl that he won, he was 19 games over 500.
Yeah.
And then the 8 years after that, his record was 48 and 67, so 19 games under 500. It's obvious, looking at those numbers, that second Super Bowl was the peak for him, and it kind of all went off the rails from there. You can see his career completion percentage is not very good, barely 60%. So you think he's barely completing 3 out of 5 passes for his career. 244 interceptions. He's 12th all-time. No full season with single-digit picks. He had at least 10 picks in every season in which he was a full-time starter.
Yeah, the only thing that he ever led the league in was interceptions. He led the league 3 times in interceptions. It's the only thing he's ever been the season leader in interceptions. Well, and consequently pick sixes, which go along with interceptions.
And then you see the 4 years he was able to get the Giants into the playoffs, that they did not win the Super Bowl. He was one and done the entire way, and his number is not good. 54% completion percentage, 3 touchdowns, and 7 picks. So it's kind of you got what you got with Eli Manning. He was going to do some things that were very good, and other things just you're completely scratching your head about, and wondering where his head is, or what kind of decisions he's making, or the quality or lack thereof of throws he would make. So We've kind of touched on this from time to time here on the show, Adam. I would. The question is here: not is he a Hall of Famer? Should he be a Hall of Famer?
Well, he is a Hall of Famer, and he's a Hall of Famer because of playing in New York and having 2 Super Bowls and 2 Super Bowl MVPs.
And his last name's Manning.
And his last name's Manning. Did he have a MVP or a Hall of Fame worthy career? And the answer is no. He was a very good quarterback for essentially 8 games in his career. And essentially, those games are what's going to define his career. Because if you look at his career as a whole and you look at what he's done, to me, to be in the Hall of Fame, you have to have a consistency and play at a high level for a long period of time. And I don't know if you can even string together 3 seasons in a row for Eli Manning where you were like, yeah, man, he's the best in the league. I don't know if he ever had a season where he was the best in the league at anything.
No.
And his 3 best seasons were all 4 or 5 seasons apart. Like, his 3 best seasons, there wasn't even any consistency from year to year. If you look at the Super Bowl years, they're separated by 3 years. And then after they won in 2011, they haven't done anything since.
Haven't had a winning season since.
They've been, again, 0-4 in playoff seasons where they didn't win the Super Bowl. And oh, by the way, one of his Super Bowl MVPs, he won for throwing for what, like 175 yards, but he threw the game-winning touchdown with 20-something seconds left. But he threw for under 200 yards, and he got saved by David Tyrell and
David Tyree, the helmet catch.
I'm sorry, with the helmet catch. Like those things are going to define his career, and he played in New York. But like if you look a little deeper, like again, the only thing that he ever led the league in was interceptions. He has almost as many turnovers for his career as he does touchdowns. He's 6th all time in fumbles and 12th all time in interceptions. Like that's not a good combination to have that many turnovers. He has more turnovers than he has touchdown passes. Now, if you add in his rushing stats, he's just above 50-50 turnover ratio. He has 5 career games with 300 yards passing and 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. 5 total. You know who else has 5? Jared Goff. And Jared Goff, we're not making a case for his Hall of Fame career. And he's also played under 100 games in his career. And he has as many 300-yard, 3 touchdowns, 0 interception games.
That was at one point
Eli Manning.
A weekly outing for like Breeze or Brady.
For almost anybody.
Or
like,
his brother.
Yeah, like his brother, Carson Palmer. Like there's a laundry list of quarterbacks who have achieved that in far less games than he did. He went to 4 Pro Bowls, never an All-Pro.
No.
He went to 4 Pro Bowls, and we could talk about how watered down the Pro Bowl has become. Essentially, since like 2005, the Pro Bowl has become so watered down that
we're not discussing the Pro Bowl today.
Yeah,
other than this.
When the 6th lowest ranked corner is getting into the Pro Bowl this season, like the Pro Bowl has become watered down. He's never been an All-Pro.
Nope.
You know who has like guys who have 3 Pro Bowls? Andy Dalton and Carson Palmer, for you Cincinnati fans, both have 3 Pro Bowls.
Never been close to an MVP.
Never been close to an MVP. Like, what about his career says he's a Hall of Famer other than 8 playoff games where they won 2 Super Bowls?
I would say if you took away one of the Super Bowls, he's Joe Flacco.
Yeah.
Does anybody consider Joe Flacco? I mean, to me,
that's a great comparison.
It's one of those things. If you put it, he's going to eventually get into the Hall of Fame. It's not going to be first ballot. He's going to have to wait. But you see guys that have multiple Super Bowls, with the exception of Jim Plunkett, they're all in the Hall of Fame. So he's eventually going to get it for that, number one. Number two, same kind of effect with Derek Jeter, by the way, for all you baseball fans. He's going to get aided by the fact that he played in New York.
100%.
And number three, his last name's Manning, because you're not going to leave him out after Archie and Peyton are in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, not with his career stat line. You can't.
Correct.
You can't leave him out with the numbers. Now, if you look at pure numbers in a blind resume, but if you look at like the scope of his career,
but the thing is,
it's not a Hall of Fame career.
You look at the numbers, and like you said, 7th all time in passing yards with over 57,000 passing yards. You have a scenario there where. That's fine, but this entire run of his career was an era where the game and the rules and the setup were all geared towards passing, geared towards throwing and putting up those 300, 400, sometimes 500-yard games that some guys do. And even in that, he's still rated out as one of the most average quarterbacks you can get. And I'm not just talking about his career record as a starter of 117 and 117. You go through that, his career passer rating is like 84. Nothing spectacular there.
Yeah, it's somewhere in like the mid 50s.
Passer rating goes from 0 to 158.3, the real passer rating, not ESPN's QBR. 0 to 158.3. His rating is 84. So by that metric, he's just above average.
Yeah. Well, and if speaking of passer rating, you know how many times he finished in the top 10 in passer rating in the NFL?
Twice, maybe?
Once.
Okay, there you go.
Once. He finished 7th in 2011, the year they won the Super Bowl. He finished 7th in passer rating.
Well,
that's the only time he's been in the top 10 in passer rating for his entire career.
A good way to...
Like, that's the metric for quarterbacks is passer rating. One time, top 10 in your entire career.
A good way to...
16 years?
Help your passer rating, be more accurate thrower. There was one time in 14 years as a starter, he completed better than 65% of his passes. One time, and it was last season, 2018, his last as a full-time starter, when he completed 66%. At no other time in his career did he complete more than 65% of his passes. Again, he's going to go into the Hall of Fame because he has 2 Super Bowls. He has 2 Super Bowls and, more importantly, 2 Super Bowl MVPs. Now, whether he deserved them or not, that's all conjecture, and that's hearsay.
Well, when you win a Super Bowl as a quarterback, you're probably going to win the MVP unless you have a stellar running game game.
He had that helmet catch with David Tyree, and then the other one that they won, he had that the best throw of his career was when they were backed up their own end zone. He threw a 40-yard dime to Mario Manningham on the sideline, and Mario Manningham had the toe drag to get it to bring it in. So that was the best throw of his career. It was a great throw when they had to have it on a game-winning drive. So I give him that. But, the numbers are going to be the thing that gets him in overall, and people are going to look more about that. The other thing two other things that kind of get me here. Number one is that how much everybody has seemingly forgot about his crybaby tantrum when he was drafted, coming out of the draft and refused to play for San Diego.
Yeah.
Did not want to go there because he and Daddy didn't want him to play in San Diego. People tend to forget about that because, by and large, ever since that point, Eli's a nice guy.
Yeah.
He's behaved himself, but people tend to forget about that he should have been a San Diego Charger, and he threw a temper tantrum and didn't want to go there. And Daddy was spearheading that because Daddy wanted to take the heat, which is fine. Parents take the heat for their parent will to take his heat for the kid. But, he's an adult at that time. He needs to face the music himself. Number two, it's harder and harder for me to get excited for guys to go into the Hall of Fame, whether they get in or whether they don't get in. Because, to me, and I think Andrew Hawkins, who now covers things for the NFL and a podcast partner with Joe Thomas, He brought up a very good point that the Hall of Fame originally was intended for guys that transcended the game.
Yeah.
And guys that were top 2, top 3, top 5 all time at their position.
Yeah, it was an elite list, and there are still a bunch of elite players, but it's starting to get watered down.
It is.
That's why guys like Eli Manning are going to make it.
This is going to be
the metric has become expanded. Like it's basically now become the Hall of Fame of very good.
He was pretty good. He was pretty good for an extended period of time, and I think what will also help his case is the fact that he started 210 straight games. That he was durable. He was never really injured at all. Until a couple of years ago, I think when he had the shoulder injury and his streak broke, and so I think that'll help his case as well. So. That's the other thing that gets me. If he gets in, and again, I fully expect him to get in. If he gets in on the first ballot, get rid of the Hall of Fame. Just cancel it. Don't have it.
But
anymore.
He might. But that's just the way it is.
I know. I get it. I understand it. But I'm sorry. He's not a first ballot Hall of Famer.
He's probably not a Hall of Famer except for 2 Super Bowl rings.
I know. I get it. But I'm saying he's going to get in.
He's Terry Bradshaw. I mean, he's Joe Namath. He played in New York. He won a Super Bowl. Like that's why they're going to get in. Well, Joe Namath, a losing record. He's in the Hall of Fame because he played in New York and he guaranteed a Super Bowl win. Like that's not the right metric. Like if the Hall of Fame is truly what it's supposed to be, and it's supposed to be elite players, like Eli Manning's not even the best quarterback in his draft class. Like
No.
he's not even the last. He's not going to be the last quarterback playing in this draft class. Philip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger are both in the same draft class, both still playing. We would assume.
Ben is anyway.
He's not better than Roethlisberger.
No.
And Roethlisberger's a Hall of Famer. He's got 2 Super Bowl wins, but Ben Roethlisberger's been to more Pro Bowls. He's got
How about going to the playoffs more?
more playoff wins.
That's
in
the other
general,
thing too.
like
Is
AFC championships.
He's going to become Eli when he gets in. He'll be the 3rd quarterback ever in the Hall of Fame without a non-winning record. Joe Namath and Sonny Jurgensen are both in the Hall of Fame with losing records as a starter. Yeah. Eli's dead right at 500. But again, you look at that Jekyll and Hyde career there. I mean, he 14 years as a full-time starter. Quarterbacks are supposed to transcend the talent they have on the field. When I think of a Hall of Famer, I'm thinking of a guy that can carry his team as a quarterback to wins to the playoffs, even when he doesn't necessarily have the biggest influx of talent around him. And you look at since that 2nd Super Bowl, not one season with a winning record. He only went to the playoffs 6 times.
He only had 7 winning seasons total.
That's what I'm saying.
And
yeah,
5 times. He only won more than 10 games 5 times, and 2 of those were Super Bowl seasons.
And those were all before the 2nd Super Bowl.
Yeah, and it's just like use his brother as an example. When the year that Peyton Manning didn't play because of the neck injury, their team went from a playoff team to what was it, 3-13?
Number 1 pick.
Number 1 pick overall, and that's how they ended up with Andrew Luck. But like. Eli Manning, him being on the field or not on the field hasn't made a difference in that franchise for almost the entire time he's been there. Like, you really couldn't even say he was the difference maker. Like, the 2 Super Bowl runs, yes, absolutely. He had some great throws and he made some good plays. But, again, he won a Super Bowl MVP throwing for 175 yards. Like, is that really elite? Is that something that changed the, did he change the way the game was played? Is it something that, like, teams, they had to game plan around Eli Manning. They were worried about the guy throwing for 200 yards.
No, they were worried about the Giants' defensive line with Strahan and all those.
Their defense was phenomenal.
All those guys, and you had Brandon Jacobs, Ahmad Bradshaw, and Tiki Barber, running backs you could hand it off to.
Yeah.
Victor Cruz, Manningham, Plexico Burress, who caught the game winner to stop New England's 19-0 season.
I mean, we're talking about it being basically a game manager. He's pretty much a game manager.
Exactly. Never looked at him as a guy that elevated his team to the next level. To me, if you're a Hall of Famer and you're being signaled as one of the greatest of all time to get into the Hall of Fame, you have to transcend what's around you and make better what's around you. Yeah. And I don't know that he ever really did that. And so, again, the numbers are what they are. I'll put up the good stats here again, but obviously Adam and I, where we sit on this. Will he be in the Hall of Fame? More than likely. Should he be? No. Here's the case for it. Again, the durability. He does have 2 Super Bowl MVPs. When they won in the playoffs, he was good. 15 touchdowns, 2 picks. But the problem is he only did it twice. And any other year that he didn't win the Super Bowl, he couldn't get out of the first round. And so I think that plays into it as well. Let's talk about the conference championship games here. And 2 very interesting games they were indeed. Obviously San Francisco, Kansas City move on, but let's talk on the other side. There were a couple of areas here that were kind of head scratchers here. The first one was Green Bay just being an absolute no-show until the second half against San Francisco.
God, their first half was so bad.
Absolute no-show. And then you have Tennessee was with Kansas City through 2.5 quarters, maybe 3 quarters of that one. Actually got out to a 10-0 lead.
Yeah, they had two 10-point leads in that game, 10-0 and then 17-7. They were leading by 10 twice.
And only trailing 21-17 at the half. So you go into the second half, and Kansas City keeps their offense going, as they've proven they can do, and Tennessee has to turn more to Ryan Tannehill, and basically they forgot about Derrick Henry. So the question is here, of those two, the Green Bay first half or the lack of use of Derrick Henry in the second half for Tennessee, which was more disappointing for you?
I was now they're both disappointing. Although I'll give the Titans a reprieve because the Kansas City defense had largely bottled up Derrick Henry. He finishes the game with 19 carries for 69 yards after having run for over 150 the previous 2 playoff games. I'll give Kansas City credit for their defense forcing Ryan Tannehill. We talked about this. Ryan Tannehill was going to be a factor, and could he handle it?
He had to be.
And he couldn't handle it, obviously. Now, Kansas City's defense, their offense is what gets talked about. Their defense doesn't suck.
They've gotten a lot better.
They've gotten a lot better as the season, and we looked at the last 6 games. They were only giving up an average of 11 points the last 6 games going into the playoffs. Now in the playoffs, they've obviously let teams jump out a little bit early on, but they've really tightened up in the second half of games. If you look at what happened, obviously their offense is the talk about the game against the Texans, 41 straight points, but their defense gave up 24 to start the game. Now, not all their fault. They had a blocked punt in there. They had a turnover deep in their own end. Defense got put in some bad positions, but really the rest of that game,
the last 40 minutes of the game,
they played really, really well.
7 points, yeah.
And then the same thing with this Titans team jumps out 10-0, 17-7, and then essentially shut them down the rest of the game. And I think that's one reason that the Titans had to get away from Derrick Henry. Now, obviously, they wanted to establish a running game early on. They didn't do a very good job of establishing early on. But again, they were playing with shorter fields and making plays and getting the points without him running the ball. So I think that was a little bit of a detriment to the Titans, is they didn't have the running game established because they didn't need it. And then when they tried to establish it, it was too little, too late, and they had to rely on Tannehill to try and lead the comeback.
Sure.
The one that's more confusing to me is the Green Bay essentially looking like they didn't get off the plane in Santa Barbara. It was just so odd to see Aaron Rodgers looked so disinterested in what was happening. Like the 3 turnovers, all 3 turnovers in the game. Aaron Rodgers was responsible for all of them. He had 2 interceptions and a fumble. The fumble where he just didn't get the snap, he just kind of backs up and lets it happen. Now I know some people compared it to the punch face situation in the Super Bowl.
That was
not the same, because the ball was literally laying right in front of Cam Newton.
That was on both him and the center.
Yeah, Cam Newton
Rodgers
was just watching the ball. Now the ball was on the other side of the offensive line. I don't, would have been difficult for Aaron Rodgers to recover it anyway. But
sure.
Just that play and his body demeanor after that play kind of just summed up how they were playing. Like it was just very ho-hum. And again, credit to the 49ers defense. We know that they're the best defense in the league, but I thought that game would be a little more competitive, despite the fact that the final score doesn't look so bad. Green Bay was never really in that game. It wasn't really ever competitive, and that's what's confusing. And if you look at Aaron Rodgers' stat line, like 31 to 39, 31 to 39 for 326 and 2 touchdowns. The problem is 2 interceptions and a fumble. They had more yards, they had a longer time of possession, but they were 3 of 9 on third down. And truly, the only 2 stats that matter in football are turnovers and total points. And when you have 3 turnovers to San Francisco's 0, you can't win a football game.
You mentioned the disinterest, it seemed like, for them in a while on the offensive side of the ball. There you go.
Well, disappointing.
Did it? I cannot recall the last time I saw a defense look more disinterested in tackling a running back than what I saw with that Green Bay defense against Raheem Mostert. It was that was embarrassing. I honestly thought for a while, and I think I even told you this. It looked like the defense was on the take.
Yeah,
they looked like they wanted no part of tackling him. Like it was Derrick Henry, that turned into the Incredible Hulk with Raheem Mostert and the way he ran. Now, San Francisco's offensive line was great.
They're really good. Their offensive line doesn't suck. They're really good.
And they played great in this game. But even he got past the front 4. I didn't see one linebacker or defensive back that looked remotely interested in trying to tackle him.
If he got through the line of scrimmage,
it was over.
He was running free. He was getting chased down from behind, and somebody put it in our chat. They're trying to make him look like Barry Sanders out there, because if you look, this is an interesting stat. You know how many touchdowns he scored in college at Purdue? 6 total.
There you go.
He scored 4 in the NFC Championship game.
He was cut 6 times before this.
Yeah.
But
scored 4 touchdowns in the NFC Championship game. He scored 6 touchdowns in college. And we talked about it before the game is, Green Bay's got a good offense and they can play with San Francisco. And really, could they force Jimmy G to have to play the game?
Nope.
Jimmy G didn't have to do anything.
Threw it 8 times.
6 of 8 for 77 yards?
Yeah.
Tell me a team that doesn't want that stat line for a quarterback. Like, he's got Eli Manning numbers there. 6 of 8 for 77 yards. Just hand the ball off.
That was Ryan Tannehill the last 2 weeks before.
Yeah, just hand the ball off. And like you mentioned, Packers wanted no part in trying to tackle him.
None whatsoever.
It was shocking to see how they just took it and like they just sat back and let San Francisco's offense punch him in the mouth over and over and over. I mean, you forced Jimmy G to throw the ball 8 times, and you didn't even really force it because I think he had 6 of them at halftime.
Yeah.
So he had two throws in the second half. You at no point in that game was the Packers doing anything to dictate what San Francisco had to do on offense. And we said, you got to force Jimmy G to do something because we weren't sure if Jimmy G can lead a team through adversity. But when all you got to do is hand the ball off and watch your running back run to the end zone, it's going to be a long day. And it was so confusing to watch. It looked like Green Bay didn't get off the plane.
I think it played into how Aaron Rodgers played, honestly. Knowing that his
defense was doing nothing.
Well, that's the thing. It looked like to me like Aaron Rodgers was playing with the mindset of number two. Another point to that, I didn't think Green Bay's offensive game plan was very good either.
No,
the way as dominant as San Francisco's defensive line has been, I was stunned to see how so few times that Matt LaFleur called design rollouts to get him away.
Yeah, just straight dropbacks against that defensive line.
I did not get that.
And again, Aaron Rodgers only had 8 incompletions, but he threw 2 interceptions, and he was under duress. Like I believe he got sacked 4 times in the game.
I did not understand that from Matt LaFleur.
Aaron Rodgers is getting old. Like you can't be putting him under duress. But
we'll talk about that in a little bit.
It's just that matchup should have been. It seemed like it should have been different, and it just didn't. Again, seemed like Green Bay never had a chance in that game. No, the 49ers controlled that game from start to finish.
I really think that played a factor into the way Rodgers was, like you said, just kind of didn't seem all that fired up, and I think it's because he knew his defense did not show up.
Yeah,
and it kind of resigned himself to the fact that they were not going to win this football game.
Yeah,
even though the numbers are what they are, but I mean, could you have a more quiet 31-39 for 300+ yards in a conference championship game?
Well, again, we're not talking about Aaron Rodgers and the sense of, they missed an opportunity. Like he didn't play well. Despite the stat line, he didn't play well. You can't have 3 turnovers and expect to beat the best defense in football by having 3 turnovers.
On the other side of the Kansas City Tennessee game, the thing that was disappointing to me there, and the Green Bay side I would say was more disappointing, but Tennessee, how quickly they seemingly abandoned Derrick Henry in the second half. This is, as you said, Tennessee was up 17-7. And eventually, Kansas City went ahead 21-17 at half. So it's a 1-score game. In the second half, Derrick Henry ran the ball 3 times after running it 16 times in the first half. So as we had said, he's probably, if they're going to win, he's probably going to have to get 30+ carries. He was well on pace to do it and well on pace to go over 100 yards. He had 16 for 62 in the first half. Second half, he runs the ball 3 times total for 7 yards, and all 3 of those carries came on the very first possession. He did not rush the ball on the final 3 possessions for Tennessee, and on in total, the final 20 plays the Tennessee had the football, he did not run the football once. And I think he may have caught 1 or 2 passes for a minimal gain. And the last possession and a half, as Kansas City was starting to build their lead, okay, you got to throw the ball, but minimal gains on the first possession, and especially on the second possession, how it was just a complete abandonment of Derrick Henry. I thought Mike Vrabel panicked a little bit there. When they got down 28-17, I think he panicked a little bit and thought, I need to come up with something big here. Otherwise, instead of sticking to who you are, doing what you do, and in doing so, keeping Kansas City's offense off the field, and in doing that, possibly you break a little bit of their momentum. I thought, both Mike Vrabel and Matt LaFleur both showed their coaching inexperience in those situations, where how quick Vrabel was to get away from the run in the second half, and then, as we talked about with Matt LaFleur, not really getting Aaron Rodgers on the move to try and go forward and try and get away from that San Francisco defensive front. I think.
Well, and maybe some of it is the inexperience as a head coach. Now, obviously, Matt LaFleur, a first-year head coach.
That's what I think it was, yeah.
And Mike Vrabel, the first time coaching in an AFC Championship game.
Sure.
Maybe that's some of it. Like when you're now. The NFC, obviously, you got Kyle Shanahan on the other side of the field, but Kyle Shanahan's also been in a Super Bowl, as has Matt LaFleur.
And
but
he has his dad to learn from, too.
But he's got his dad to lean on, and you know, some may argue that maybe the Packers overachieved a little bit. So
they played a lot of close games.
They played a lot of close games, and they ended up at 13-3. But
that was another thing that got me too, was how many times we had to show Mike Shanahan on the broadcast.
Yeah. Well,
oh my God.
When your dad's famous and you're winning a game, like it's not completely unexpected.
It's been 20 years since he was a coach of a competitive team or contending team. I mean, come on. Anyway, you talked about Aaron Rodgers there and how his performance, numbers-wise, was good, but just watching it wasn't quite the same. He, after the game, still feels pretty good about their team, and I think he also knows, to what we were talking about here, that they might have overachieved a bit this year in that, you know, they finished 13-3 in the regular season, but played a lot of close games, and you could make the argument that without his play, certainly, they don't come anywhere close to 13 games, as many close games as they played this season. So he has said after the game, he still feels their window is still pretty open as far as contending goes. You got Matt LaFleur now, a year of coaching under his belt. You know, Rodgers obviously apparently still feels pretty good physically to play. Are you on board with his thought that the window is still open for them to be contenders?
I think it is, and one reason is it appears that the rest of that division is not caught up to them yet. Now, we thought the Vikings might be closer. You look at the end of their season, maybe they're not as close as we thought. The Lions, who knows what the hell the Lions are doing? They continue to stick with Matt Patricia. After firing their previous head coach for having a 500 record, they continue to stick with Matt Patricia.
He's cussing out Shea Patterson.
Well, which is good. It makes for great sound bites, but it's not, if you're a Detroit Lions fan, which a lot of my friends are, not the best look. And Lord knows what's going on in Chicago with refusing to get away from Mitch Trubisky.
Hey, they hired Bill Lazor as offensive coordinator.
They did hire Bill Lazor, and I like Bill. He's a very nice guy. He used to live in this area. His son used to go to the middle school that feeds our high school. I don't know if anybody's getting closer to the Packers right now.
Okay,
and if you look at what they have coming back,
there. But what I mean is, there's a difference there between leading the division by default because everybody else is not as good, and then being a serious contender.
But if you look at what they have coming back, Aaron Jones, 1,000-yard rusher, Devontae Adams, almost 1,000-yard receiving. Rodgers threw for 4,000 yards, 26-4. Like I don't know how that window's closing. Like, you look at the energy. The difference in the energy on their sideline this year, the relationship that appears to be building between Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers appears to be a very good one. They have core pieces. Jimmy Graham looked pretty good this season after having kind of a letdown in Seattle. Who knows how much longer he'll play, but he seemed to be an outlet, particularly in the playoff games. One of the scores for them against San Francisco was the pass. Wow, just short, but the set up the touchdown to Jimmy Graham. And their defense wasn't bad. Like, they didn't look good in the NFC Championship game, but the defense looked pretty good most of the season. They found a way to win close games again. Went from 6-9 to 3-13. Or 13-3. I'm sorry. I would say the window's still open. It really hinges on I think Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers played really well. It's hard to say that he didn't play even in this game. Despite the 3 turnovers, stat line looks good. He's been a Pro Bowler the last 2 seasons. It's hard to argue that he's aging to the point where he can't do the same things that he used to. So I don't know. I would say the window's still open. I mean, the NFC, obviously, it looks like the 49ers have become the elite team in the NFC. Now, free agency and retiring and all that stuff, who knows what happens with some of their guys, because they do have some guys on their team that are getting a little older too. But, again, it's just they were very competitive this season, and they were 1 game away from the Super Bowl, and it's hard to say that the window's closed and that all of a sudden next year they're going back to being a 8-8 football team and aren't going to make the playoffs and can't make another run at it. I mean, if you look at the talent of the team when they won the Super Bowl in 2010, like, were they elite talent in 2010? I don't think so, but they found a way to win. Like, they were one game away from doing it again without super elite talent, but just a very solid core of players, and led by, again, a head coach who really kind of reinvigorated that franchise after kind of the letdown in the last couple of seasons with Mike McCarthy, where a lot of people looked disinterested, and that all seemed to change.
Well, that relationship with McCarthy and Rodgers was pretty much fractured at the time. That
Yeah,
McCarthy
but
was
again,
let go.
it became disinterested.
I think it's time now for Green Bay to understand that Aaron Rodgers is on the back nine of his career. As you said, very good year still. I think his completion percentage, if I'm not mistaken, was the lowest of his career this year, something around like 62, 63%. So that's down. But I think part of that, too, I don't put that necessarily on him. He's at the point where, as we said a couple of weeks ago with Tom Brady, you have to start now getting him some weapons. Yeah, Aaron Jones had a great season to take some of the load off of him as a running back. You had Devontae Adams, as you said, pretty reliable weapon. Jimmy Graham's on the back nine of his career, clearly.
Yeah.
But what else do they have around him? And I think that's the problem, is that it's a similar problem to what's happened with New England, is that they've let it go. They have not addressed what's around their Hall of Fame quarterback to try and help him out some. You know, he's still got more left in the tank, obviously. He's probably still another 3 or 4 good years left in him. But it's time now for Green Bay to start getting him some help now. If you want to try and get him another ring before he rides off into the sunset and goes into Canton and also the Lambeau Ring of Honor, you have to start getting him some help now. You know, the defense, I think, overachieved a little bit given the talent they have there. Obviously, some guys had very good individual seasons themselves. Zadarius Smith turned out to be a terrific signing away from Baltimore. He was all over the place. It's somewhere near 15 sacks. A couple other guys played really well, but you need to address those types of things. You think you need to get some more help from Rodgers, especially on the right side of the defense of the offensive line.
Yep.
But get him another receiver, get him a young tight end, and try and reinvigorate him even more so.
Yeah.
You seemingly have a system that is conducive to success offensively, but he needs the talent to go with it now. It can't be all now on Aaron Jones and Devontae Adams, because
I agree.
you can key on a running back and one wide receiver and essentially game plan to take them out of the game. Can you not?
You can.
You need to have another threat or two. I think it was not the best move by Green Bay to let Randall Cobb leave, because he was that slot guy, that safety blanket over the middle that Rodgers could go to. Was not a game breaker by any means, but he was certainly
having a check down always helps.
He could move the chains.
Yep.
And I
Keep
think
the ball moving.
Exactly. And I think when you had to rely on Devontae Adams consistently to do that, that doesn't always lean towards long-term success offensively. Still a great year, but again, now it's time, as Rodgers is getting a little older. You know, he's not too far away from 40. Let's start getting him some more help. And so the window's open, but you need to help do something to prop that window open.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a big part of it. All right, let's move on. And teams now starting to get off-season stuff going away. We touched at the top of the show at the Bengals. One of the teams coaching the Senior Bowl, Elder Boy, believes a good move for Green Bay would be to go sign A.J. Green. We'll see.
It wouldn't suck.
Wouldn't be the
Well,
worst move.
there's also another guy who used to lead the AFC North in receiving, and that's Antonio Brown. He's a free agent.
if you can get him to unlock himself from his house.
Oh, God. Well, as soon as he does, he's getting arrested.
He is.
So stupid ass.
Yeah, there you go. So the Bengals have said they plan on keeping A.J. Green for next year, which likely leans to what I said. What's probably going to happen is they'll tag him with the hopes of signing him in training camp to a long-term extension. But the more interesting thing of this week was a report from Adam Schefter came out. He was saying that sources indicated to him the Bengals have no intention on trading the pick. Well, now the Bengals are down in Alabama getting ready for the Senior Bowl. Duke Toblin, who is the Bengals director of player personnel, is essentially the general manager without the general manager title, because Mikey just can't give up anything.
Refuses to have a general manager. But
right.
Whatever.
Yeah, so Duke Tobin is the guy, and he's done some interviews, obviously, and he has said that report is basically bollocks, that it is untrue, and the reason why he says one of the reasons why he says it's untrue is because they've not had any meetings on what they're going to do in the draft, which I found laughably Bengal-like.
Yeah,
the 3 months.
Way to Bengals.
The 3 months before the draft that could potentially change your franchise, you apparently have not had one meeting about it,
and you're literally already at the Super Bowl, Senior Bowl. You're at the Senior Bowl. You know you have the number one pick. You've known you've had the number one pick for a month already.
Yes.
And you haven't had a single meeting about what the possibilities of it are. Like, the college football season is over. You're at the Senior Bowl, and you literally haven't made one meeting about what to potentially do with the number one pick. Just a brainstorming meeting. Like, we have meetings for high school football. You know how many times we've met for our high school football team already? We've met 4 times since our season ended already, and we don't own the number one pick for a multi-million-dollar NFL franchise.
And I think it's Duke Tobin.
Talk about it.
Duke Tobin has been down to Baton Rouge to watch Joe Burrow play. Obviously, Columbus is an hour-and-a-half drive from Cincinnati. He could go up there anytime he wants if he wanted to scout Chase Young.
Oh, by the way, Joe Burrow was in Columbus this past week.
He was in just north of Cincinnati too.
Yeah, he was in the Mason area, just north of Cincinnati.
Eating
he was
wings.
in Columbus eating a steak at a local restaurant.
The steak is named after him.
They named a steak after him, and credit. I'll give him a
Ruby.
shout out. Credit to Jeff Ruby. They named a steak after Joe Burrow. It's a Cajun style steak for the LSU
steak with a lobster on it.
Yeah,
steak burrow.
Steak burrow is what they call it. It's with crawfish, which is the Cajun part. And they're donating $9 from every steak to the food pantry in Athens, Ohio, that Joe famously gave a bunch of money to, or raised a bunch of money for after his Heisman Trophy. Jeff Ruby following suit, donating $9, which is his football number, to the food pantry for every steak that's sold. I've heard that it's delicious. Maybe one of these days I'll go get a chance to try it. My wife and I are due for a steak dinner one of these days. So maybe we'll go give it a try before they draft him. If they don't draft him, the steak might not be on the menu very long. But we'll see.
They're not a sponsor of our show, but Jeff Ruby steaks are pretty good.
They're delicious.
They're pretty good. It's a pricey venture.
Yeah,
but
it's worth the investment. It's not a dinner you can eat every week, but it's worth the investment every once or twice a year. My wife and I, we know the family, that his daughter Brittany, and my brother Caleb is married to Jeff Ruby's daughter Brittany. So we know the family, great people, really nice family. And again, never to be said that Jeff Ruby doesn't do a lot for the community, because he really does do a lot for the community. He's a big sponsor in a lot of things, donates a lot of time, and money to a lot of great causes. And this is just another one. Credit to him again. Assuming that Joe Burrow is the number one pick,
apparently we don't know.
We don't know yet, because the Bengals still have it up in the air.
They haven't had a meeting about it.
They haven't had a single meeting.
But so the report has been refuted that they're definitely keeping the number one pick, as was basically reported by Adam Schefter earlier in the week. So now, that leads to speculation that the number one draft pick may be available for sale. I think it's. I wouldn't have said. I would have come out and said, that's not necessarily accurate. We're still evaluating things. I wouldn't have come out and said we have not had a single meeting about a draft.
Yeah, I kind of would have left it a little more open to kind of see what packages people put together. And you're going to throw one up here on the screen.
Here's one that a national sports writer has proposed. Obviously,
this is not Carolina proposing it. This is a sports writer proposing.
Carolina is the sexy idea, because you have a new coach there. And Matt Rule is a head coach. They've hired Joe Brady away from LSU to be their offensive coordinator.
The passing coordinator from LSU.
And you see,
so he worked closely with Joe Burrow.
Carolina has the 7th pick of the draft. Yep. So they're pretty high up there. So this is a package that this sports writer, Will Brinson, has proposed, that the Bengals would get the Panthers, basically their number 1 and number 2 for this year and next year.
Yep, 7 and 38 this year, and then 1st and 2nd for next year.
So that's one.
It's an intriguing proposal. If Carolina brought that to the table, the Bengals have to sit down and consider it. There's no question they need to at least consider it.
Nope.
The problem is, these are the Bengals, and we've lived in Cincinnati long enough, and obviously being a part of the franchise, I know enough that Mike Brown is not trading this pick, and it doesn't matter. And here's the thing: Katie and Duke and Troy, they could all sit down and say, no, we need to trade. Dad, listen, we need to trade this pick, or Mr. Brown, we need to trade this pick. This is what we can get.
Do you think Katie addresses him as Mr. Brown?
I don't know. Who knows? I think she probably just calls him dad.
They convinced him to hire Zach Taylor. Remember, he wanted Hugh Jackson, Mike Brown did, and they sold him on Zach Taylor. So you can't always assume Mikey's gonna do whatever he wants.
But if you look at the history of the Bengals in the draft, one, the Bengals don't trade. They just don't trade draft picks ever. Like I've been here for 15 years. Can you ever remember them trading any draft pick, let alone their first round draft pick?
They've done some minor things here and there.
Later, but I don't think I've ever a first round draft pick trade for the Bengals. I don't think it's ever happened. Now, typically they're picking in the top 15, which makes it less likely. This is, I believe, the fifth time they've had the number one overall pick.
Nothing this high profile.
Yeah, nothing this high profile with a quarterback who's from Ohio and started his career at Ohio State and broke college football records. There's no way this pick gets traded. Now, not to say that it shouldn't, and not to say that there aren't going to be teams who are going to present really good offers and that they should trade back and get a bevy of picks because there's so many holes to fill. And the other thing too, and we'll get into this more when we do our draft preview after the Super Bowl, I think that this is a pretty deep quarterback class. I don't know. Now, Joe Burrow looks to be elite, and he's clearly the number one pick, and that's what people are going to be trading up to get.
He's the class of this.
He's the class of the class, but
right.
If you look at it, Tua Tagovailoa, I can't ever say his name. Tua Tagovailoa.
There you go.
Is what many would assume was going to be the number one pick in the draft. Now he could fall to 4. If the Dolphins skip him at 4, he could fall even lower. You look at Justin Herbert, who at one point in time was people said he could be the number one pick in the draft. At one point in time, not this season, but at the end of last season, he could have been the number one pick in the draft. And I feel like the kid from Utah State, I can't remember,
Jordan Love,
and there's a lot of quarterbacks who are going to be, in my mind, first 2 round picks and can be starting quarterbacks in the NFL fairly soon. That I don't know if the Bengals have to take Joe Burrow. And history would tell us that, the last time that really a number one pick became like the elite quarterback would have been Andrew Luck, and prior to that was probably Peyton Manning, or maybe look at a guy like Carson Palmer. But really, most of the best quarterbacks come from later in the draft.
It's not always a sure thing.
It's not always a sure thing. Even Eli Manning, number one overall pick, he's not even the best quarterback in that draft class.
No.
There's other quarterbacks to be had that you can put in the starting role that are going to be available, even if the proposed trade with Carolina at number 7. You could find the starting quarterback at number 7 very easily. And you could pick up 3 extra picks by doing it. But this is the Bengals, and Mike Brown doesn't trade the number one overall pick, and it's not going to happen. But I'm not saying it shouldn't, but I think it should, but Mike Brown won't. They should trade it, but Mike Brown won't.
This is a type of if that proposal that this writer proposed that Carolina should offer for the Bengals 2 1s and 2 2s, I would laugh at it. To me, it's because you don't know what you're going to get a year from now. What if Joe Burrow goes to Carolina and blows up, and that first round draft pick he gets in like the 20s or something like that? That's the risk you run. Of course, it could be terrible next year. Do you want to get the number one pick? I get it. It worked out for it. You thought it would work out for Cleveland when they made a trade and they had two top 10 picks. They had Houston's first pick. To me, this is it's so obvious that unless somebody pulls a Ricky Williams move and offers their entire draft to go get Jeremy,
which may happen like that.
Not in this day and age with the way teams value draft picks nowadays, because it's cheaper than going out to free agency. Obviously, Mikey's all about the cheap.
Yeah,
and especially with the restructured pay scale of these rookies coming in too. Yeah. It's one of those. I'm fine with them just refuting the report. It's just a really bad look to say 3 months away from potentially drafting a guy that's going to be the face of your franchise for, in theory, the next 10 to 12 years, that you haven't had a single meeting on what you're going to do. I think that's very Bengal-like, as I said, and very stupid, which is why it's very Bengal-like.
It's really not that surprising.
No, not at all. So, again, unless somebody comes up and offers something insane, like an entire draft, maybe even more, that's the only thing I would consider with it.
I put this proposal in our group chat. Maybe let the Patriots do their entire draft. Let them do the drafting and then trade the pick
There you go.
after you've traded it. But
I think there was Joe Goodberry, who covers the Bengals for The Athletic. Somebody asked him, what would you ask for in a trade? He said 5 first-round picks, 5 second-round picks, $100 million in free agency, and a practice bubble. Other than that, you're not trading the pick.
Yeah,
But we'll talk more about that in our draft preview coming up a little bit down the road. Let's move on to a guy who we talked about was part of that 2004 draft class with Eli Manning, Ben Roethlisberger. Phillip Rivers, he might be on the move as far as teams go. He's already made a move with his family. They've permanently moved from their home in San Diego across the country to Florida. He has family down in Florida and wants to be closer to them, and I'm sure they want to be closer to him and his soccer team full of kids.
Only 9. Still working on number 10, right?
I don't know.
He's got 9. For those of you who don't know, he has 9 children.
There you go.
I mean, he can afford it, obviously.
So he has options this year as far as where he can play. Obviously, LA can be an option, and obviously other options are going to be available. Do you see him? I don't see him returning to LA next year.
I don't see him returning to LA. Now, he has publicly said that he would like to.
I don't see it.
I don't see it happening. I think they've moved on. Now, if you look at their roster of quarterbacks, they're going to have to go get a draft. If that's truly
you've got Tyrod Taylor.
Move. You have Tyrod Taylor, but
we'll say
let's be honest about Tyrod Taylor.
He could be a stopgap.
He's a stopgap. He's not a long-term starter.
You could look at him as...
And then Easton Stick, their 5th-round draft pick from last year. That's the only other 2 quarterbacks they have on the roster.
Hey, he's a Bison, North Dakota State.
Good for him.
Won all the national titles.
You 8 of the last 9 national titles.
In theory, you could look there at a scenario with the Chargers is... Tyrod Taylor is a stopgap, and you use the number 1 pick on either Tua Tagovailoa, basically use it as a redshirt year for him to recover from the hip surgery, which he said, by the way, he's going to throw come like March or something like that. So he's going to have a chance.
He's planning on being able to throw by the combine.
There you go. Will he throw at the combine? Probably not. He'll throw at his pro day.
Yeah, he'll throw at his pro day, but he's planning on being able to do that.
You could also, there's also Justin Herbert would be probably available. I think they have the 6th pick.
Yeah.
He could possibly be there too as a guy you could sit behind Tyrod Taylor and learn for a year and then move forward. So there are options there, and that's one of the reasons why I think the Rivers deal with the Chargers likely is coming to an end. And you could see it the last couple of years. He was heading towards that Eli Manning type play.
Good,
he's made some really bad decisions. And well,
I know as a former fantasy football owner of Phillip Rivers that he's made a lot of bad decisions late in the seasons. And if you look at it, he's only played in 1 AFC championship game. He's been very consistent over the long term, but again, it just hasn't been able to get over the hump, and his days in LA and San Diego look to be coming to an end.
To your point from the Bengals before, Elder Boy asked in the chat, there was a team in I believe 1999 that offered their entire draft for Akili Smith, and Mike Brown turned it down.
Yeah,
how Bengal-like would it be now for Mikey to consider trading his pick now when he turned it down for Akili Smith, who was the 3rd pick in 99.
And I think wasn't it somebody at the time was that the draft where somebody insisted they were going to draft him and turns out they were bluffing? It was New Orleans insisted
somebody like that.
They put out there publicly that they were going to draft Akili Smith, and so the Bengals felt they had to draft him, and then it turns out they wanted Ricky. I believe it was Ricky Williams.
That was the year that they got the entire draft trade.
Yeah. And then they ended up taking Ricky. They ended up taking Ricky. New Orleans took Ricky Williams instead, and again another Bengals-esque moment in the history of the Bengals.
He started 16 games for the Bengals.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to Phillip Rivers here. What are you looking at as a team that would make sense for him next year if he doesn't return to the Chargers?
With so many moving pieces, and you look at the veteran quarterbacks who are going to be on the move, I think obviously the Tom Brady situation, I feel like Tom Brady's heading back to New England no matter what, but, it's free agency, and he might go get a few free steak dinners out of taking the tours or whatever. But, so much of it's going to hinge on the draft, too. Like, if Carolina decides they're done with Cam Newton, maybe he goes to Carolina. If Miami decides that there's too good of a player at number 4, or teams trade up ahead of them at number 4 and they don't take a quarterback at number 4, maybe Miami's the right fit for him. Like it really, a lot of it's going to depend on where the other free agent quarterbacks go. I not that he's far down the list, but I don't think he's everyone's priority. I think everyone's going to take a flyer at Tom Brady first, obviously, as they probably should. But again, he may not sign until after the draft, just depending on what teams draft where. Maybe San Diego doesn't find a quarterback at 6 because there's somebody they can't pass up at 6, and he goes back to San Diego. It's really tough to say. In these days of free agency, how much money is he asking for? Is he asking to be paid? Like these elite quarterbacks, the younger elite quarterbacks that are making over $20 million a year. Is that what he's going to ask for? Is he going to ask for,
he's going to ask for that.
Yeah, but is somebody willing to pay him 3 years, $60 million? Is that something that's out there? Now, I don't know. It's so much of it hinges on front offices and what other guys do in free agency and what happens in the draft. It's hard to say what the landing spot is for him right now. And I know you probably have a team that you have in mind off the top of your head. I just don't know. There's too many what ifs of what is happening to where he could actually end up.
I think one of the connections that would make sense on the surface would be Tampa. You have a deal there where they've got the $20 million option on Punchface, who led the league, who threw 30
By the
picks
way,
this year.
Tampa, if you're listening, Bruce Arians and whoever's in the front office down there writing the checks, do not sign that. Don't give him that money. Like, he's a bum. Like, he's a shitty person, and he's not a very good quarterback. Again, he sits in his postseason meeting, and he tells you all about, well, if I get rid of the turnovers, I'm the best in the league. And I'm balling. Like,
he's had more turnovers.
You're a bum. You're trash.
You are what you are at this
point.
The
most turnovers in the league since you got into the league. Like, stop it. You haven't even been a full-time starter all the time, and you still have the most turnovers.
I think on the surface, it makes sense because they have maybe the best trio wide receiver core in the NFL. You have
offense doesn't suck, or shouldn't suck.
You have a defense that's getting better. You've got a pretty good tight end down there. On the surface, it makes sense. As we talked about here in the past, Bruce Arians has never really seemed like a guy that's wanting to. He doesn't
like projects.
Wants to have a veteran there, knows what he has. I think that could make sense. And obviously the connection with Phillip Rivers now moving his family to Florida, that also makes more sense.
Doesn't hurt the.
And I'm sure some sleuth out there will try and find out where Phillip Rivers enrolls his kids in school, because some people figure if the kids are in school here, Dad's probably going to try and play there. Similar to what people were doing with LeBron James's kids.
Yeah, when his kids moved to LA, but.
Right. But I think it
doesn't hurt the narrative that he moved to Florida.
The one thing that gives me cause for concern is that Bruce Arians has a very vertical type of passing game. And I don't know at this point in his career that Phillip Rivers has the arm to operate in that kind of passing game.
It certainly doesn't seem like
he needs more of that the West Coast offense type of feel to me. And it's tricky because you also don't see Phillip Rivers as a guy who would be willing to sign somewhere knowing that he is going to be a stopgap. He strikes me as a guy who still feels like he's got plenty left in the tank and still feels like he could go another 4 or 5 years as the guy, not as a guy to turn it over to another guy, but as the guy. And so I think that's another difficult thing that makes it tough to try and figure out where he could go. I think Tampa Bay makes the most sense.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's necessarily the best fit, but I think it makes sense because I don't see how, as you said, I don't see how Tampa can give that money to Jameis Winston, and I'm sure even if they exercise that option,
give him the money.
Well, they have that option at $20 million. He's going to probably want a new deal.
Well, he's already said that he thinks he's worth in the deal he was asking for was somewhere in the range 7 years over $200 million.
Right, and so
and that's
even if
Punchface is not worth that. I'm sorry,
no, he's
not worth that at all.
But even if you exercise the option, now that he has come out and said that, you've got a potential holdout on your hands looming there.
Good, let him hold out, bum.
What?
Sorry.
Well, but then you have, what does Tampa do from there? Who do they have behind him? Because they don't have Fitzmagic there anymore. I don't think Miami would be the fit. I think they'd like Fitzmagic down there, can use him as a stopgap to whomever they draft this year, and then they'll cut loose Josh Rosen, and his career probably will end. So whether it's Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, whomever the case may be, I think it'll be one of the first two. I think Tampa makes sense.
Yeah.
But again, this is so tricky because he just seems like the guy who feels like he's got a lot left in the tank, and I don't necessarily know that a lot of teams are going to evaluate him in that sense. I don't know that necessarily a lot of teams are of the mindset that if we get him, even if it's only for 2 years, that's going to put us over the top. Because he's not that guy.
Yeah, he's not. And we talked about it, similar to the Eli Manning situation. Philip Rivers' career now has had longer, better stretches in there than Eli Manning has. But is he the quarterback to put you over the top?
He's
and again,
also
only
never
one
been
AFC championship game.
I'm going to say he's never been successful in the postseason. He got to the one AFC title game.
Yeah.
And it was the year he played on a torn ACL.
Yeah. And he's an 8-time Pro Bowler and 2-time All-Pro. Again, better than Eli Manning numbers. Again, Eli probably the third best quarterback of his draft class. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame anyway. But it just at this point in his career,
it's very tricky.
At 36 years old, is he really, or 37 next season, is he really going to be the quarterback who can put your team over the top? And I don't know if he still is. And again, maybe that's why he has to be a stopgap quarterback. But like you mentioned, Tampa Bay seems like a good fit. He does have a tendency to turn the ball over. It's clearly not as much as Jameis Winston, but
Bruce Arians is used to that.
Bruce Arians is used to seeing turnovers. And again, if they can kind of redesign that offense to make it where everything's a little bit shorter and not spread the field as much, maybe it is the right fit. And like you mentioned, Bruce Arians doesn't like projects, and Philip Rivers certainly isn't a project. And we know, despite his quotes in the media sometimes, and he says some dumb stuff, he really is not an issue as far as when it comes to public perception. He's not going to go out and do stupid shit. He's got 9 kids at home. Like he's not going out to the bar.
He's not an off the field problem.
He's not an off the field problem. And maybe that's worth it. Not having the headache of a Jameis Winston who's an idiot off the field. Maybe that headache's worth it too. Not worth it anymore either.
You'll see times of him on the field ripping his players, or on the sideline ripping his players. But that's on the field stuff. That's.
But again, Bruce Arians commands a little more sideline respect, where maybe Philip Rivers doesn't need to do that anymore. Maybe Bruce Arians takes that pressure off of him and demands more out of the people around him. Part of the time in San Diego is you felt like Philip Rivers had to do that because he was the one who was in charge, and there wasn't a lot of sideline presence from the head coaches that have been there through the years.
No, they let him pretty much run it.
And Bruce Arians has a little bit more of a sideline aura or persona.
He's much more. He's an alpha.
Yeah, Bruce Arians likes to be in charge, and maybe he takes over that part, and that takes a little bit of pressure off Philip Rivers. And it's intriguing, but again, a lot of it's going to hinge on the draft and where other free agents are going to go. But the move to Florida and everything that surrounds it, Tampa Bay does seem like it could be a good landing spot for him. So we'll see how it plays out. One storyline, with quarterback free agency, Philip Rivers is one of the storylines. Next thing we're going to look at is Super Bowl storylines. We're going to get into a little bit early talk about the Super Bowl, just a smidgen, because we got to fill an hour next week, and I don't think there's going to be a long. We'll fill an hour. We got no problem doing that. We're already over an hour this week, but we'll fill the hour. But again, it's just. Probably not going to be a whole lot of stuff that happens in between now and then. Now, maybe we'll give you a Pro Bowl recap after the Pro Bowl this week. Just kidding.
Not unless there's like a Sean Taylor laying out a punter type play.
No, that would be fun. That would be worthwhile. But here we are.
I do like the idea. Speaking of the new the onside kick rule, they're going to try.
Yeah, they are the Pro Bowl, and again, like most All-Star games, they do a little small experiment. Of what they could do for rule changes. They're going to do a new onside kick rule. So that's going to be
the rules. They're going to it's a new kickoff rule where basically after you score a touchdown, you can do the conventional kickoff. But you also have the option to what would basically be a 4th and 15, I think, from where the kickoff spot is 35 yard line. You can try one play. If you convert 15 yards and get to midfield, you keep the ball.
Yeah, it continues like
going.
A drive.
But if you don't convert, the other team gets the ball at the dead ball spot.
Yeah.
So if you only gain like 5 yards, the other team gets the ball at your 40 yard
similar
line.
to an onside kick scenario.
Yeah.
You just have a higher opportunity because you get to call an offensive play.
Yeah.
Which is fun. I do like that, and we've talked about before. Kickoffs may soon be out of football. We may just be done with them.
There.
It's getting to that point where essentially now every kickoff is a touchback, essentially, anyway, or at least it could be. a touchback.
Yeah.
And so the answer is, well, if they don't have a kickoff, how do you get an onside kick? And that is, it's come up in discussion before. It's going to be interesting to see how that works out in the Pro Bowl. Now, it is the Pro Bowl, but
any coach, either one of those coaching staffs that decide to do a conventional kickoff in that game should be fired.
Yeah, you really shouldn't, because again, it turned, especially in the Pro Bowl, it's going to be a kick, it's going to be a touchback. So you might as well give yourself an opportunity, and let's see how it works out and see how the fans respond to it. It'll be fun.
Have some fun with it.
Yeah, run a trick play.
Yeah, the shorter fields are going to lead to more points, but obviously with a shorter field, you can kind of disguise the fact that defense isn't exactly cared about.
Yeah, defense. Nobody cares about defense.
They've tried a little harder the last few years.
They have a little bit. And J.J. Watt got under people's skin a few years back and said, hey, if we're just going to go out here and slap hands, then what are we doing it for?
He's absolutely right.
100%, I agree.
He's totally right.
It turned up the tone a little bit. Now you're still not going to see quarterbacks getting their heads taken off. But, there is a little bit more tackling and so on.
They're trying a little
bit harder. It's a little bit more competitive of a game. But, again, we're not even going to preview it because at this point, it's a participation trophy. It's the New World Participation Trophy. No, nobody cares about playing in the Pro Bowl anymore.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Is I wish teams would take Pro Bowl clauses out of contracts.
Yeah,
because you have guys
you're just paying out money to everybody.
Fifth and sixth and seventh alternates.
Yeah, the seventh alternates are making it.
And because you've moved it to the week before the Super Bowl, which is fine, I get that. All the teams that are in the Super Bowl, which generally have a ton of Pro Bowlers, they're not going, obviously. They don't even make an appearance wherever the Super Bowl is. This time it's in Orlando, which isn't far from Miami. You could easily have those guys there and say, like, hey, they're here, but they're playing in the Super Bowl next week.
Well, yeah, just
they're not even doing that.
Have them give a little wave.
Yeah.
Just give a little wave, sign a few autographs. Again, you got to keep it.
There's your Pro Bowl preview. Look for the onside kick rule and see if anybody kicks off. Light them up on Twitter.
They probably shouldn't.
No, they shouldn't.
Don't kick off.
Don't kick off.
Don't even use kickers. I don't even know why there is such thing as a Pro Bowl kicker. Shouldn't even have a Pro Bowl kicker. Just go for 2 every time. Screw kickoffs. It doesn't matter.
The point is screw kickers.
Yeah, who cares about kickers?
Well, as Adam talked about, a Super Bowl coming up next week, and we'll obviously have a full preview on next week's show. We're going to be a little
Brian in the chat just asked, could you see Baltimore and Kansas City keeping the ball the entire game next year if the onside kick rule was instituted? He says he's not sure if he'd like the make it, take it rule.
Andy Reid would
That is a good point.
Andy Reid would be the one that would say, let's do it, because he has the offense to do it. John Harbaugh being a special teams guy, no, let's do the kickoff, let's cover downfield, let's back them up.
Yeah,
let's play with defense.
When you got the offense they have.
Andy Reid, I believe, once a quarter would do that if that rule was implemented. Once a quarter, I could see if that rule was implemented, I could totally see a scenario come where some team keeps the ball for more than 50 minutes in a game.
Yeah, if the other team's defense just can't keep them off the field. Now, I think there's a bit of gamesmanship. I think
do it
at some point. It would happen. It would probably happen less often than we think, because it would probably only happen in true onside kick scenarios. Kind of a gentleman's agreement type deal. Like, if you don't need the ball back, why would you try it?
It's kind of the same thing as when they moved the extra point back to the 17-yard line. You thought because everybody's going to go for 2 then, because you're only 3 yards away, and most teams still go for the conventional extra point.
One. But it'll be interesting. But I feel like the NFL would do it a little bit more.
Do it, Andy Reid. You got the
most. I just feel like it would be a little bit more of. It would only happen in true onside kick scenarios. I don't think it would happen. I don't think it would happen all the time. But
do it on the opening kickoff. Opening kickoff. Balls to the wall.
What would be the rule on the opening kickoff? Like,
same thing. There you go.
You might see that guy. Was it the guy from Texas who never punts? Or was he New Jersey? I don't know. There's a high school football coach. Never punts. Refuses to punt ever. He's punted. I believe he's punted twice in his entire 20-year career.
Both
times were 4th and 30 from his own 1.
That man is an American hero.
He never punts. He always goes for onside kicks. And anyway. Enough with Pro Bowl scenarios.
Brian's KC versus Lions would scare the heck out of him. No gentleman's agreement there.
That's probably true.
If that rule gets put in, I'm telling you, there's going to be a game. There's going to be one game. It'll probably never happen once and never again where some team will have the ball for more than 50 minutes.
Because they'll just do it over and over. But,
right.
Anywho.
But if you can't stop it, then why wouldn't you keep doing it? All right. Super Bowl, again, just a little taste, and we'll get into the whole thing next week. Give us one Or maybe two storylines that maybe that you're going to be looking out for.
I looked at a lot of storylines.
Okay, you got a lot.
I think the most obvious is Kansas City's offense versus the 49ers defense, but that one's kind of a punt. It's just easy to go with. I think one interesting storyline is the Chiefs have never lost a game by more than a touchdown with Mahomes as their starting quarterback. I think that's an interesting storyline that they play a lot of close games to the point where they've never not had an opportunity to win the game, which is fun. The other one, another one, both of the head coaches have a loss looming over their head in the Super Bowl, and one of them is going to get that monkey off their back. Kyle Shanahan, obviously the offensive coordinator for the 28-3 meltdown with Atlanta and New England, has that over his head. Andy Reid lost 24-21 to the Patriots as well. Some accused him of mismanaging the clock near the end of the game because they were winning that game.
He 100% did.
So both of them kind of have the monkey on their back they need to try and get off. That'll be interesting. The battle of the tight ends. Now, Kerry Kittle and Travis Kelce, the two best tight ends in football, is which of them is really elite. Both two monster personalities. Both of them post game. Kerry Kittle.
George Kittle.
I'm sorry. Kerry Kittle's
the
basketball player.
Played the NBA for a number of years.
My mistake. George Kittle
Yeah.
came out with the Jimmy G T-shirt on. I thought that was awesome. And then Travis Kelce obviously on stage screaming, "You got to fight for your right to party."
Yeah,
which was awesome.
Jim Nance freaked out about that. He called into the Dan Patrick show. He thought Kelce was going to say the F word. He's like, "Oh my God, I got an F bomb coming here. What do I do?" And he just sat there and took it, and Kelce behaved.
But I think those two personalities, and both of them integral parts in their offense. Kittle led the league for tight ends in receiving. Kelce's had a better playoff run thus far.
Are they the two best tight ends in football?
I think they are. I don't know if there's a better two. And then the biggest one for me, and I think this is one of the biggest keys for the game, is can Jimmy G win with adversity? And we haven't seen it. Now, their defense has been so dominant and given him so many short fields. The Green Bay game, he didn't even have to play. Like, you could have put the Robo guy back there. He didn't even have to play. So,
Elder boy saying, "Have another drink after the Kerry Kittle."
Well done, Dan. George Kittle, I apologize. #Fumblegate. But the biggest storyline, I think this is going to be one of the keys, is that can Jimmy G win with the adversity? 6 of 8 for 77 yards, really didn't do anything in the NFC Championship game. How does that factor into it? Because we know Mahomes can win with adversity. We know they've played a bunch of close games. Again, only one, never lost a game by more than 7 points his entire career. What is going to happen with Jimmy G when he has to play from behind?
I think my biggest one is along the Jimmy Garoppolo line as well, in the fact that he's on a path that Ryan Tannehill was on the first 2 weeks of the playoffs, and that he had to throw it so few times and yet their team won because they were able to run the ball so well and their defense played well. Will he have to go down? Will he have to make those types of throws? I'm sure there's going to be a prop bet out there, and if there is, I'm going to try to find it. The over-under of the number of throws Garoppolo makes, because I'm guessing, if I had to put a guess on that, probably somewhere in the mid-teens.
Yeah.
Will he have to throw it 20 times? 25 times, and what will that spell will that spell good news or bad news for San Francisco? We really don't know, because he's not been put in those situations. We keep waiting for him to have to be put in those situations where he has to throw the football to try to win games, and to this
I think
point,
in this one he has
happened.
to. I think he's going to have to.
Will that be the big thing? Will he have to? I think that's the thing, and if he does, how will he perform? Will he handle it well, or will there be some essentially rust because he has not had to? He's not had to throw it so much, and from the mid-second quarter of the game against Minnesota all the way through now, he's thrown 14 passes.
Yeah.
Through basically 6.5 quarters of action, he's thrown 14 passes. Will there be rust on the arm of Garoppolo and in the eyes of Garoppolo? Against a Kansas City defense, it's much improved over the last half of the season. So that's the thing I'm going to be looking out for. as much as anything else. And again, we're going to talk about all that stuff coming next week. Next week's show is going to be entirely dedicated to the Super Bowl. We always like
Unless something major happens, if Eli
Correct.
Manning decides he didn't really want to retire, we can talk about why he's probably not a Hall of Famer again. I mean, he is a Hall of Famer, but we could talk about probably why he shouldn't be again. But yeah, assuming something groundbreaking doesn't happen in the next week, we will be back next week to discuss all of your Super Bowl questions. We'll do the prop bets again. We'll do the over-unders. We'll do all that kind of stuff because that's a little bit of fun. But we'll preview the game. We'll give you our predictions on the game and what we think is going to happen.
Can I get a score out of you?
I'll make a score for the Super Bowl.
There,
I got a 1 week. 1 week to prepare. I'll come up with a score for you.
That's not reason enough to tune in. Yeah. So we got all that coming up. Send us on the Twitter, on the Facebook, comment on our videos, some recipes that you have for Super Bowl snacks. Obviously that's a big thing. Everybody loves the different kind of food platters you have. Take a picture of what you have at your party and drop it on our Twitter at Fumblegate, Facebook.com/Fumblegate. Drop it on there. Let us know how you're celebrating the Super Bowl.
We'll do the over-under on Fumblegate Fatty's beers for the game. We'll do that too again. That's always a good one.
I'm going to set the number on it because...
You set the number and I'll give you the over-under.
Yeah.
And now I feel like it's a little bit cheating because I can't control it myself. But part of it is,
that's why I'm going to pick
I have to watch 3 kids, so it does make it a little bit different.
That's why I'm going to set the number because if you set it, it's going to be...
Well, yeah, obviously, I would just beat my own, but
you'll go over on purpose just to
well,
say
yeah,
you
but I still got to control it. Again, the Super Bowl prop bets they have out there, like will a fan run onto the field? Like I feel like you can control that yourself. If I'm a Vegas gambler, throw my money down.
Elder Boy's saying Bovada out in Vegas says Jimmy Garoppolo's over under at 29.5 attempts.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
We
will preview this next week.
That line better change coming next week.
Yeah, we will definitely cover that one. Thank you, Dan, for that one because we will definitely throw that into our Super Bowl preview.
Mahomes at 35.5. That's more intriguing.
That one's more in tune, but
if
Vegas is usually right. Like
if
unsurprisingly,
Garoppolo, I'm just going to say if Garoppolo's at 29.5 right now. That's handing out money.
Yeah, that number will probably continue to drop. You would imagine.
We'll see if that happens again. Send us your recipes. Send us your photos when the Super Bowl comes. Send us your photos of your Super Bowl party. If we get some good ones, we'll throw them up here and give you a shout out. So let us know how you're doing that. Obviously, as Adam said, all the prop bets, all the ins and outs, and we will have the Super Bowl predictions. And folks, we're going to get a score out of him. You know how much he hates providing scores for anything.
Vague, but I'm gonna give you an actual score.
He'll give you an actual score. So make sure you tune in for that next Thursday, 10 a.m. live here on YouTube. And while you're watching this video, go ahead and get subscribed to our YouTube channel if you're not already.
Share it with your friends. Tell your friends to subscribe.
And while they're there, ring the bell so you get a notification through your email, through your mobile device.
Pops up right on your phone.
And lets you know exactly when we're live so you can enjoy it, on the go, at work.
Dan and Brian are both at work today. They joined us in the chat. It was a lot of fun, and
absolutely,
we like talking football and we like having fun and drinking beer. So
and drop any questions that you may have that you want us to discuss as far as the Super Bowl goes. We'll get into that as well, and then maybe the following week, if you have just other general football questions, we'll get into that as well. So again, we thank everyone for joining us this week. This helmet is still massive. Will the Bengals screw up? And trade the number 1 pick by next week.
I don't know if that's screwing up. We just talked about. I don't know if that's screwing up, but it's a potential.
Will it?
The Bengals can find a way to Bengals anything. Will they keep? Will they
screw up and get basically nothing for the number 1?
Yeah, or will they keep the number 1 pick and not draft Joe Burrow? Who knows?
We don't know. And
we'll talk about the Bengals being the Bengals.
If they do that, would you put this helmet on backwards?
I might come out of retirement. I don't know.
Plenty to stay tuned for next week. We'll see you next week here live on YouTube. You've been watching the Fumblegate podcast.